It's that time again. The annual conference of the American Society of Ag Consultants, otherwise known as ASAC, is going to be held in Fort Myers, Florida, this November 4th and 5th. Kurt Covington is one of 9 professionals who will address the conference. The other speakers who will cover a wide range of topics represent Florida Farm Bureau, Florida Citrus Commission, University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture, National Ag Law Center, Risk Mitigators and Advisors, Tyler Associates, as well as the lead economist for dairy at CoBank, and myself, Chrissy Wozniak from North American Ag. The day and a half of presentations will be followed by ag tours on Tuesday afternoon at Echo Farms, one of my favorite places here in Fort Myers. Attendees will experience farming at its most creative, with unique demonstrations, plants, and techniques being used to help farmers and urban gardeners in developing countries. A second tour at Echo will showcase simple technologies that can improve food, water, and shelter for millions of people. A third tour of a hydroponic grower is also being planned. For more information and to register, visit www.agconsultants.org. That's www.agconsultants.org. See you there. And welcome to North American Ag Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. I am so excited today to talk to our guest. We're diving deep into the world of tobacco production with an expert in the field. He's dedicated his career to developing and implementing educational programs that guide farmers in producing high-quality tobacco. He collaborates closely with county extension agents, researchers, and various agribusiness groups to deliver research-based recommendations, ensuring that Georgia and Florida farmers have the most up-to-date information at their fingertips. He coordinates a team of specialists providing crucial knowledge on everything from production and harvesting to curing and marketing tobacco. He's a driving force behind the University of Georgia Tobacco Team and the visionary leader of the annual Georgia-Florida Tobacco Tour, which showcases the latest advancements in tobacco farming. And I was fortunate enough to attend the 3-day tour a few weeks ago, and I was struck by the fact that this is a crop with a million enemies, from pests, disease, weather, to legislation, politics, and marketing. So we're going to discuss this crop and the unique challenges that it faces. From the University of Georgia, I would like to welcome Dr. J. Michael Moore. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining me and for your wisdom and your leadership.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So let's start out with your background. How did you get to where you are today?
I, first of all, was raised on a tobacco farm in eastern North Carolina. When I finished high school, I went to NC State and finished a bachelor's degree in agronomy and went on to be a county agent there for 5.5 years in Duplin County in the eastern part of the state, one of the larger tobacco producing counties. While I was there, I was fortunate enough to have support for working on a master's degree at NC State in agronomy as well, but with a tobacco project. I had a research project that included plot work on the experiment station in Whiteville, as well as in the county where I was providing educational programs to farmers. And as I finished that, I went on to Virginia Tech and spent 3 years there working in Blackstone at the Southern Piedmont Center and taking courses in Blacksburg, completing a PhD with a tobacco project there. So, and when I finished, I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to interview for the extension tobacco specialist position in Tifton, Georgia with the University of Georgia. And I've been there for the last 34 years.
Wow, you've seen a lot of ups and downs in the industry.
Yes, I have, and it's a continuing roller coaster. It seems we seem to be on a downhill decline on the size of the crop, but there's always important things to talk to farmers about in producing a quality crop that is in demand by the manufacturers.
Right, and can you describe your role and your responsibilities as a tobacco specialist at the University of Georgia?
Well, I work directly with county agents to provide educational programming that they can help present to their farmers to improve the production and make sure they're following required guidelines. Good agricultural practices are a requirement of growers now. They have to have a unit of achievement, get a check mark on their card every year, so they attend a one-day session where this is covered. But they also attend county meetings that county agents organize and invite them in so that we can talk more on a one-to-one basis with growers and talk about their problems and what solutions might be that have come along. We talk about new varieties, new chemicals, new ways to apply old chemicals, and controlling pests with a minimum of expense and work on the part of the grower.
Yeah, that's great. And not too many people deal with a crop with so many enemies. So let's start by talking about disease. I was completely shocked to learn on that tour that Georgia tobacco farmers, they face 30 to 40% expected crop loss every year due to tomato spotted wilt virus. So tell us about the disease, the challenge, and then how these growers deal with facing that kind of loss every year.
Well, tomato spotted wilt virus is an interesting disease. It's our number one disease and has been so since the late 80s when it was first found in tobacco. Our growers do yearly experience from 20 to 35, this year it's 35% of the plants that show symptoms of the virus. The symptom might be on one leaf late in the production season before topping or so. It may be that that plant is attacked by the virus, which is carried by small thrips and introduced into the plant. It may kill the plant within 2 to 3 weeks after transplanting. And so you have a vacant space. That plant's not there to take up added fertilizer, which means that the plants on either side get over fertilized and are a little greener and a little lower quality, even though they may be higher yielding than other plants. So we have limited control measures that we can use for this virus. We're actually trying not to attack the virus, but to control the thrips that are spreading the virus. A thrips, very small insect, lives in the ditch banks and the woods along the paths around the tobacco fields. And as soon as the tobacco is transplanted, they come into the field, they're blown in or fly in from the surrounding area. They introduce the virus then to the tobacco, and then it's likely that within 15 seconds of probing, that they can introduce the virus. Not every thrips is infected with the virus, not a carrier. Thrips must acquire the virus as a juvenile right after hatching. That means that the plant that they hatched on and are a juvenile on must be infected with the virus. So if they take the virus into their body and it becomes a part of them, then for the rest of their life cycle, and if they probe, there's a likelihood that they can inject the virus and infect a plant. Tobacco is very susceptible. So we use 2 different methods, 2 different chemicals to control tomato spotted wilt virus in tobacco. We are using imidacloprid in the greenhouse as a tray drench. We produce our transplants in greenhouses in a float system primarily, where foam trays float on a bed of water that contains fertilizer and in some cases pesticides for the production of those transplants. Now, we would then drench these plants so that the root ball, when it's pulled from the tray and it goes to the field, becomes a reservoir of the imidacloprid insecticide and is taken up by the plant systemically and provides some control for as much as topping time or even beyond. We have a second chemical that we're using. It's called Actigard, and Actigard is a systemically acquired resistance material. It causes the plant to actually sort of beef up its own resistance to the virus. If we use both of these products correctly and timely, we see that we get about a 50% reduction in the virus and the problems with the disease from an untreated situation. Now, that's only half of control. We don't have a silver bullet. We're not able to control the disease entirely. So we're expecting to suffer some losses on an annual basis. And unfortunately, in Georgia, that I think has taken the profit out of production many years because growers have lost just that little bit of plus that they have for profit.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know in a lot of the trials we saw were focused on breeding for black shank resistance. Can you talk about black shank, what the challenges are there, and kind of any hope for the future?
Yes, black shank generally is discussed as a fungus that it lives in the soil. Tobacco really is about the only crop that it causes damage to. And as long as tobacco is there, it can increase and live in the soil. When tobacco is not there, it's still in the soil. And even 20 years later, if you introduce a susceptible variety in that field, the first year, it's very low level of the disease. But if you come back the second year, then you can build that inoculum back up very readily, and it's very deadly. Fortunately, we have resistance that is in the breeding programs of the major seed companies and the universities that produce tobacco varieties. And we've been very fortunate to have resistance included that meets our needs in Georgia. Of course, that as you go through the breeding process and you add one trait that's of benefit, you tend to lose something. And in this case, we keep the quality, we keep the disease resistance to black shank, but we lose the size of the root system. And that's the support for that plant. We're talking about a plant that's 5 feet high and has 20 to 30 leaves on it that are just like the blades of a fan in your living room. And so the wind can catch these leaves very easily, like a sail, and push these plants over sometimes. And that's a real problem for us recently, as we have seen more and more thunderstorms that come through with lots of rain, not just the showers, but downpours of 1 and 2 and 3 inches at a time, and gusts of wind that only last a few minutes, even seconds, but at high speed and push these plants over. The root system is just not sufficient on many of these varieties to hold these plants upright, and they must be upright in order to mechanically harvest them through the season. If they're not, then we just don't have the labor force to do the hand harvesting of these plants that we used to. It used to be family operated small farms, and today there are very few young people involved in tobacco production. It's larger and larger mechanized operations. 300 acres would be probably the median size that I'd be able to take you to in Georgia. And they would hire a limited number of people to help move that leaf from the tobacco field to the curing barns, where it's placed for a week with circulated heated air to remove the moisture and dry it to oven dry. And after that point, we would then take it out. We'd add a little moisture to keep it from crumbling, and we'd put it then into bales, and we'd move it into a contract receiving station where it would be purchased from the grower by the companies as they looked at the outside of that bale and placed a bid on it. The grower then has an option to accept that bid based on the color quality of that leaf, the buyer's really his own personal opinion of it. They can accept it or decline it. And if they decline it, then they have the option to take it to another company and let them take a look at it. So that's sort of the process. Labor is very important. The
Yeah.
H2A program has been very important too. Tobacco production, it's a very laborious program to monitor, and our larger farmers are hiring people just to manage the paperwork and keep up with people in their paperwork, I-9s, payroll slips that document everything that they do and how much they get paid every week during the summer.
Yeah, when I was thinking about all of the enemies of tobacco, I didn't even think about labor. Of course, that's in agriculture, that's one of our main problems, right? And that crop is like you said, so labor intensive. Um, if you don't mind, especially thinking about our row crop people from the Midwest, this is a much different crop where we're not just seeding, we're using transplants. And can you back up and talk about how that plant grows and the different stages that it goes through before it's even harvested?
Okay, certainly. We seed our tobacco greenhouses in January generally, and we're applying a peat-based medium to the trays that float on the water, and then we add a clay-coated tobacco seed to each cell in those trays. They generally will be a 242 per cells per tray, or 288 are the main trays that we use. They're placed on the water with fertilizer to be added to the water. The media absorbs through the hole in the bottom of the tray. The water, it wicks up through the cell, and you get germination. Now, I said we place that seed on top of the media. Tobacco needs light to germinate. So if you bury the seed like you would corn or peas, it's not going to come up. If you put it in a dark chamber, even though vegetables go into a germination chamber often in a greenhouse, it's not going to come up. But if you put it in the sunlight on top of the media, it will germinate, and we'll have probably full germination in about 10 to 12 days. And what we're hoping for then is a uniform production of plants so that every plant in that tray is useful in going to the field. After about 60 days, we'll begin to groom those trays in the whole greenhouse. We actually use a lawnmower that's mounted on a rail, and it runs up and down the greenhouse, clipping off the tips of the taller plants and giving those smaller plants a little more light, a little bit more of a chance to come up and become as big as the other plants in the tray. Again, we're shooting for uniformity and the use of every plant in that tray. So we'll do that probably 5 to 8 times during the spring when we're producing these transplants. In Georgia, transplanting will start sometime around the 1st of April, and we'll go to the field then by carrying the trays on trailers to the field, placing them on the transplanter, and one person per row generally is pulling a plant out of the tray, placing it in a cup that rotates and drops that plant then into an open slit to which water is added. And the slit is then closed by the press filter, and often it's sprayed with a herbicide over the top to reduce weed growth and competition over the next couple of weeks. So that's transplanting, and that's occurring 65 to 70 days, maybe a few days later. And from there, you'd hope to grow that plant another 60 to 65 days before the top begins to come out. It's flowering in that time period. You've cultivated 2 to 3, maybe 4 times. You've added fertilizer to the side of the row, trying to space it out so that you don't put all of it at one time, because you're hedging against the rainfall. We never know when it's going to rain, and in our sandy soils, particularly the nitrogen and the potash have tendencies to leach down out of the root system and away from use. We are controlling pests. We have a number of pests, budworms, hornworms, aphids, thrips, flea beetles that are all pests of tobacco, and we have to maintain control. We're fortunate to have an insecticide, Cordion, which is applied in the transplant water, gives us systemic control of budworms for 7 weeks after transplanting, generally. And that kind of helps us sleep a little better until we begin to have our scouts then tell us, oh, we're seeing some budworms. Either the Cordion's giving out or the season is a little different. The pressure's a little heavier. We're making some foliar applications for control of budworms. So we're very fortunate to have that particular material to give us that edge. Otherwise, we're making applications of foliar materials for the control of these insects as needed and based on scouting and thresholds. So after, as I say, 60 to 65 days, we've got a nice, beautiful flower that's emerged out of the top. Unfortunately, we're not in the business of growing flowers, nor are we in the business of producing seed. And that's what that plant wants to do. It wants to push out a beautiful flower to have it fertilized and produce seed. Well, most of these plants are not going to produce seed anyway because they're hybrids. But that beautiful flower is sucking out moisture and nutrients that we like to push into the leaves to make them heavier and higher quality. So we remove that flower and toss it on the ground and then apply one of 3 different types of sucker control materials. That's the axillary bud that grows between the stalk and the leaf in the leaf axil is called a sucker. And there's at least 3 of those that will come from those leaf axils after the top is removed. Think of an oil well, and you put your hand or you put a cap on it, and it's not going to go easy. It's going to spread out and spray everything around it until you can get that cap set on top of the oil well. Well, this is what is happening. All that pressure, those nutrients and water are still going towards the top of the plant. Let's push them into the leaf by controlling the buds that then start sprouting at each leaf axil. So that's really a very precision program that is really hampered by the weather, because just about the time we begin to try to control suckers, some of these materials like maleic hydrazide, it takes about 8 hours after application until you can really feel certain that you have gotten good absorption of the product and you get good sucker control from it. It is a systemic material, but it has to have time to be absorbed. And if you get that summer shower that comes in the middle of the afternoon and you've only had it on for 4 hours, you got to make that decision, that expensive decision, that important decision to come back and reapply and guess at how much washed off and how much was actually absorbed into the plant. Growers that have been at it for 20 to 30 to 40 years, as many of our growers have been, have loads and loads of experience doing this. They always would like to have somebody else help them guess at what I need to do. And that's where our county agents come in. All along the way, our county agents are trained to help growers with recommendations for controlling pests and producing a better crop through the season.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that too, the weather, especially Florida and Georgia, you're going to get hit by a hurricane. There's going to be farms for sure hit by a hurricane at some point in the season as well. And like you said, with those big leaves, I'm sure that the devastation would be pretty bad.
Tropical storms and hurricanes are very detrimental to our crop. We're fortunate that most of the time, by the time the hurricanes come through, if they come on land in our area, most of the time we've finished the harvest. Last year was a bad year. We did have tobacco that was not finished the harvesting process, and we did lose yields. And of course, that's right off the top for the grower. Unless he has insurance, and there is hurricane insurance, but it costs to add it on to your crop insurance program. This is a direct loss to the grower. So very important there that you manage that risk as well. So
Yeah,
that
for
takes us
sure.
up to harvest and harvest. Many folks, I think, have ridden through the Blue Ridge Mountains, perhaps, and see tobacco hanging in barns in sheds along the way, and they see the whole stalk of tobacco cut and taken to these sheds and hanging there to air dry over a 6 or 8 week period. That's not what's produced in Georgia or Florida. We're only producing flue-cured tobacco. And what we're doing is then harvesting in multiple passes the leaves off of the bottom of the plant, and we move gradually up the stalk. So we remove 6 or 8 leaves the first harvest. We then put them in the curing barn. We remove the moisture over a week-long period, and there's a prescribed program that's followed to increase temperature gradually as the moisture is removed until it's an oven dry product. We add moisture back to it so we can handle it and it won't crumble with us, but it's already been cured and it's a beautiful golden color. That it has that rich aroma that flue-cured tobacco is known for. There are towns in South Georgia that folks along the street, you stop anybody who grew up there and they'll say, "Oh, I remember the warehouse. I remember that wonderful smell that came every year when tobacco began to be marketed at the auction warehouses." So it's very, very aromatic and something that's known far and wide. The process then is to remove the lower leaves and move gradually, week by week, up the stalk. We use a mechanical harvester to do that. It's essentially rotating paddles that spin and push down the leaves. Everything below where that paddle is set then is knocked on a belt. The belt takes the leaves into a trailer, goes to the barn, and goes into the curing box, into the barn, and then through the process. We try to remove as much hand labor, and the goal is never to have to actually handle those leaves or move them around by hand. And we've almost gotten to that point, but we have to have humans to monitor the process, to run the machinery and that kind of thing. So it's a very specialized process when we do hire labor in the management of harvesting and curing of tobacco.
Yeah, wow, it's really mind-blowing how many steps there are to this crop.
You mentioned farmers out west and the Midwest and how different tobacco is from anything else. I would hasten to say that most of the equipment beyond a tractor and a disc and plow, most of the equipment in tobacco is very specialized. It doesn't work in any other crop. The harvesters, the barns particularly, are very specialized for tobacco use and just really don't have another use. So that's an investment that a tobacco grower has, that he can't just change crops from one year to the next.
Right. Yeah, that's a really important part. And one of the other enemies is often legislation. I know that in Florida, the Tobacco Free Florida campaign has been a real thorn for Florida growers. So how do you see legislation contributing to these challenges that the growers face?
Well, growers produce a legal product which is
Mhm.
important for feeding and clothing their family. And it's important to local communities and states obtain taxes from sale of tobacco in the state once it's processed into tobacco products like a cigarette or a cigar. Um, Tobacco growers are not involved beyond the point that they actually sell this product to a manufacturer. But for every increase in sales tax on a tobacco, for every 10% increase, there's a 1% decrease in consumption. And that's been true for many, many years. We're seeing a decline in consumption of manufactured products like cigarettes and cigars over time. And we are becoming a smaller crop year by year. Still an important crop to the local economy and to that individual growers that are involved.
Yeah, definitely. And interestingly enough, you you can think about, remember how eggs were bad for a while, and we were being sold sugary cereal that's better for you, and all of these different things, like butter is bad, and they sold us margarine, and these marketing campaigns. And because I live in the marketing space, this type of things really irritate me, when it's clearly marketing campaigns. But of course, tobacco is probably one of the only products that's sold with this is going to kill you, scare tactic marketing, right? And it really drives me crazy. But the interesting thing that I've heard recently are some studies and articles and some podcasters too talking about the benefits of tobacco to humans. And I'm just wondering, have you heard of any of that? Do you think that there's some truth to that? It's always interesting to me because I think so much of our life is controlled by marketing. So, and I'm sure the plant does have benefits, right? So have you heard any of that? And is there any truth to it?
Well, our ancestors certainly believed that there were medicinal uses for tobacco in the early years. Um, Many folks believe that by having a chance to smoke a cigarette, it gives them a chance to relax and unwind. Um, that's a personal choice that anybody of legal age has that opportunity to make. Generally, it's true that there's really no other use for tobacco except as a consumable product. Um, Nobody's going to recommend cigarettes or smoking for anxiety or Parkinson's. I heard that today. Somebody said, "Oh, did you know that Parkinson's can be treated by using tobacco products?" Well, and there may be some subtle involvement there, but I can't say that I know for sure that that's a situation. But it would be nice if we had another use for the product, but unfortunately, there really isn't any established use. There's everything from suggestions that it might be used to remove rust in, for when you're doing some painting, um, poultices, all kinds of things through the years, but nothing really consequential and lucrative to a producer.
Yep, good point. And now to something more positive. I was really impressed with the people involved in the industry. I had just such a great time on those 3 days of, from those gracious farm families that hosted the trials and the tours, fed us, the industry professionals that devote their careers to research, cultivation, solutions. What do you appreciate the most about the people in your industry?
They are my family, and I think most tobacco growers and those that provide agribusiness products to support the tobacco growers would tell you tobacco growers and the industry are like a family. I've talked to a number of growers today, and one or two of them are known to be centers of conversation, TikTok and other social media, and they know everybody in the industry and everything that's going on and how the weather is affecting parts of the industry and when the companies are going to start buying, for example, this year. So very family oriented and a very caring group of individuals as a family.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And these producers, they're tough. Like they're facing so much. I just you have to value that or see that when you visit with them and see that they're strong and brave, really.
And they have significant risk involved. I was with
Yeah.
growers yesterday that talked about having an investment and expecting returns of over $2 million in this crop, and the wind can blow it down and the hail can beat it up, they can have total loss overnight. So they're very, very risky process that they're involved in.
Yeah, definitely. So what's your advice to the American producer through 2024 and beyond, any farm family?
Any farm family beyond tobacco?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I think it has to be the same. More and more, the profit for any agricultural product has been reduced to a very small amount. And in order for the grower to even gain that profit, he has to watch his expenses from day one throughout the production and marketing of that crop. He has to know the latest information on varieties, on chemicals, pesticides, pest control practices, and he has to put those in place. That takes being active and attending meetings locally, looking at different social media sites and being aware of what's going on, watching and listening to podcasts such as this, so that you can be exposed to the latest as far as research and extension work. Don't get into a cat closet and just say that you're not going to be involved. You're going to be off the grid, and you're just going to go back and produce it the way Granddaddy did. It won't work. Just can't do that by yourself. But if you do take advantage of the information that is available and put it into practice with good management, then perhaps there's a profit at the end.
Yep, great advice. Across the board, coast to coast, great advice. And so where can people find you, what you do at the extension, and then also about the tour for 2025?
Well, we have a website, georgiatobacco.com, that has a history of our production information and research on it, recommendations. We have a production guide that growers turn to for information on new varieties, on pesticides that are recommended, and changes in recommendations, changes in the pesticide itself, a new formulation, and that's important when you go from a product that now you use a third as much as you used last year because you have that new formulation. You have to be aware of these kinds of things. So georgiatobacco.com, but the best place to find information on production starts at your local county extension office and with your local county extension agent. We're very fortunate to have agents in all of the tobacco producing counties that we work with to make sure that they're aware of the latest. And they are interested in helping growers day in and day out. They get those after bedtime calls and before they wake in the morning calls. Sometimes just need to verify what I need to do today on rates, on pesticides, on timing. So they're part of the family too.
Yeah, I love that. And I have one last question for you. Why do you serve the industry personally? What are you most passionate about every day?
I love the people, and I get a lot from interacting with the tobacco family. It's very important to me to stay in touch, and I feel very fortunate to be able to say that I know every tobacco farmer in Georgia and Florida personally. I can tell you the name of their wife and many times their children and their achievements. And it's just very gratifying to say that we've had a part in helping to grow that family and see their successes. So yeah, I love the people, and I get a lot of gratification from working with them.
Yeah, yeah, and I could see that they love you too in my brief 3-day experience with the group. Well, thank you so much, J. Michael, for joining me today. Um, just great information, and I'm sure people are going to be surprised about how much work and how many enemies this crop has.
Well, I think that it's an interesting crop, and anyone who would like to learn more would certainly be interested in talking with them.
Wonderful. And thanks to all who are watching or listening. If you want to learn more, all the links are provided in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to North American Ag Spotlight on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Listen Notes. Or if you prefer video version, you can find us on Rumble or Telegram channels or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like the episode, I would love it if you shared it. And have a great day.